So I will now introduce our next session, which will be led by Dr. Janice Golding, who is the focal point for the Nature, Climate and Energy program stream within UNDP, also focusing on greening the economy and climate change. Janice will be looking at an assessment of results as well as the alignment to the CPD, and then challenges, lessons and recommendations. So thank you, Janice, over to you.
So friends and colleagues, we have now heard in very elaborate ways about the challenges experienced in 2020 as regards the delivery of the UNDP country program in South Africa. We've also been shared some of the highlights and some of the side aspects that could have been taken as opportunities or could have been seen as negative risks. But the purpose of this facilitated discussion, really, dear colleagues, is to get a sense from yourselves on how did we do last year. What could we have done better? What could we have done differently? And when we think about these very, very important questions, we are hopeful that we can work together with you to come up with maybe just 3 or 4 key recommendations. From the resident representative, you have heard the need for the delivery of our commitments. In our country program document, we have a compact with the government to deliver on agreed goals and objectives. So how can we fast-track, enhance the achievement of those goals and objectives? In other words, how can we fast-track the course of the delivery of our initiatives, projects and programs? That's the first thing, delivery. What can we do better and differently? A second area outlined by the resident representative today was around resource mobilization. The RR was very clear when he gave the examples of some of our Latin American country officers who mobilize upwards of $100 million, right? And by far the greatest proportion of those resources are originated from the government. How is this possible in South Africa? So if we could come up with some recommendations on how we can enhance resource mobilization, then this would be well received. Some other recommendations we are trying to work towards is around effectiveness of the governance mechanisms. You know, we have multiple steering committees, project steering committees, but how do they feed ultimately into this program board structure? And how can the deliberations and the agreements and the recommendations originated from this project board find expression in the various project steering committee meetings and our various engagements? So, dear friends and colleagues, those are the kinds of recommendations that we are trying to work towards in this program board meeting. So I am going to open the floor for deliberations, for discussions, points of contention around some of these areas. And when you share your reflections and thoughts, it is with a view to looking at what was achieved last year in 2020. Later on in the agenda, my colleagues will be presenting the targets and the goals for 2021, and that is also part of another discussion. So for now, the focus is on our 2020 achievements against our targets and the results, the challenges and the lessons learned. So colleagues, the floor is open if there are any questions, and if there are none, as the facilitator, you know, I do hold the license perhaps to ask some of the colleagues to in being provocative for their reflections. In this vein then, I'm going to ask one of our longest standing partners. In fact, they've been a partner for almost 25 years, and that is the South African National Biodiversity Institute, SANBI. We have a representative here from SANBI. And to give you some background, our partnership with the South African National Biodiversity Institute was first put in place in 1996. And subsequent to that year, there have been several other partnerships. So we would like to open the floor and give the opportunity to one of our longest standing partners to provide some reflections on delivery, on partnership enhancement, on resource mobilization, and any recommendations that you may have would be very well received. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that, Dennis, right now. And yes, you are actually right now catching me off the guard right now. So so basically speaking right now, just off of the top of my head right now, as I mentioned earlier before, I am working with SANBI right now as part of the biodiversity and land use project as well. So we had actually officially began this work in actually 2015, and we were supposed to have actually finalized our work last year. However, as most of you know, because of the whole COVID thing right now, we were not actually able to actually finalize that as well. So we were then granted our no cost extension as well. So we are going to be finalizing everything by August this year as well. So from our side right now, what we have really learned by actually working within this actual COVID environment right now was the actual benefits of us right now working online. So for the BLU project right now, we have quite a large capacity building target right now, focusing mainly on right now as well government institutions, private sector as well, etc. And so from our side right now, once actually COVID hit right now, all of that basically stopped right now. So, but however, right now, what we had been able to do was to really move most of our training programs online. What moving them online was able to actually do for us was that we were firstly able to actually reach a much wider audience than what we had been planning to do as well. So, for example, one of my colleagues has been really engaged with the actual capacity building for all of those environmental impact assessment practitioners as well. And so, because of COVID and us moving most of our training programs online, what that had allowed us to do was for us to be able to then do our actual training within far more provinces than just those working within our targeted municipalities right now. But as I did mention before, we are currently speaking, we're wrapping up right now as well. In terms of your final questions right now, regarding right now resource mobilization as well, that is something as SANBI which we are currently speaking, grappling with right now. So right now, speaking right now specifically on my work area, which is really focused around actual municipal support right now as well, with the actual funding wrapping up right now. At the end of this year right now, I really need to actually figure out how we can actually finance our actual municipal support work going forward right now as well, and also feeding into all of those other national government priorities as well. One thing which I really found interesting, which the first speaker did mention right now was for the UNDP to be also focusing on some of those actual district development model municipalities right now. And I think for us as Sandy right now, for us to really get more bang for our limited bucks right now, we should also try to focus on some of those actual municipalities going forward right now, because they are going to be then getting so much funding as well. And I think also going forward, what we are going to also need to also do is for us to be working far closer with all of our partners as well. So both the National Department of the Environmental Affairs right now, the Department of the Agriculture, Land Reform, and Rural Development, SALGA, our other provincial department, provincial conservation agencies, etc., because I think from my side right now that is really the actual only way which we will be able to make an actual difference on the ground as well. Thanks.
Actually, thank you very, very much for your powerful reflections. You said earlier that you were caught off guard, but you've really done well being caught off guard. So just to perhaps summarize some of your key points, you have emphasized the importance of downstream training and capacity building, particularly at the subnational level. I think you've also touched on the importance of both your own organization and UNDP as well to become more agile at communicating in the digital space. I think last year was an incredible learning curve for all of us to adapt to a virtual environment, an virtual engagement environment, which is very, very different to an engagement, to a virtual learning environment or a virtual working environment. And thank you for raising the importance that perhaps there's scope for us to do better when it comes to communication and engagement in the digital space, and that there's also scope for improvement in terms of wider communication really on our programs in the digital space. You also touched on areas relating to area-based programming, and how district development models can actually enhance the opportunities for resource mobilization and leveraging new partnerships, reconfirming old partnerships, but also opening up the opportunity for new partnerships. And so you will hear later on in the discussion today, in fact in the next discussion, how area-based programming is being addressed in the 2021 CPD work plan. Our colleagues Fred Chikwene and Aubrey will be presenting ideas on area-based programming. I would like to, so thank you very much, dear Sagwata. Are there any other comments and questions from our guests here today? Here in the physical environment, as well as colleagues in the virtual space. The floor is yours.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you, Janice, for giving me the floor. No, it's not a question, it's just a brief reflection. When we talk about the program board also has the responsibility of steering our country program. We have a country program that was approved last year, so we're entering the second year of country program implementation. And one of the questions we ask is the way we see the different interventions that we're having. Are we on the right track in terms of achieving, the results that we propose in the country program document? We have all the outputs defined. The res rep, when he made his intervention, he indicated that 70% of our portfolio is on environment, but we have areas of intervention in governance, in inclusive growth. When we look at the projects that we have, we don't have much in those areas. So as program board, one of the questions we have to reflect on is, what can we do? First of all, how do we see the progress in implementation of the CPD in line of the projects that we have currently? And then how do we see the future in terms of catching up on the different areas of our country program? Because at the end of the cycle, we will be asked to report. We made commitments with government of South Africa, where we say we are going to support the government of South Africa to achieve its development objective, using our program framework. And at the end, we'll be asked to go back and tell the government and the people of South Africa what we have done. So it's important that we also think about that. How are we going vis-a-vis the CPD, the country program? What can we do to enhance, the implementation of this program, particularly in the areas where we see apparently we are weak? So that's a reflection I wanted to. And again, the issue of resource mobilization, because as I say, in the program, the objectives are clear. The results that we expect are clear. Now the main issue are the resources to implement the program. What can we do to, to obtain the resources to move forward with the program? Thank you.
Thank you, Janice. I think let me just build on what Gabriel just mentioned, so that there is clarity about joint resource mobilization. And I was mentioning in my earlier statement, when I was my discussion with my colleague in Argentina, where compared to us, it's just about 15 million here annually. In Argentina, it's about $147 million last year mobilized. And more than 95% of it is from government of Argentina. And I think the clarity is perhaps an operational challenge. It might not be a serious issue with our IPs. For instance, if you talk about my brother that just spoke now, or let me just talk about Department of Economic Development of Gauteng as an example, is that if, for instance, in 2021, the program we want to jointly implement is about, say, $4 million or 100 million rand. And we agreed that, okay, in this, UNDP will support with about 40 million rand. And Department of Economic Development of Gauteng province says, okay, this project is in our budget for this year. And we have already budgeted about a certain amount of resources to it. What we usually know to do to jointly mobilize, part of joint is, in terms of cost sharing, is that the resources, the 40 million rand from UNDP plus say 60 million rand from Gauteng province, pulled together. That's the kind of part of cost sharing arrangement, which is part of resource mobilization. But I think we've not been doing that quite well, because we just look at the partnership with UNDP without thinking about what component of that project is currently in the work plan and the budget of that particular implementing partner. And I think we need to really see how we reconcile it. And the second one is that, okay, now that we've done something together and we've seen the value of it, can we then bring in other partners on board? This is one of the examples given by Cleofast in the low-cost internet access, where the former DFID is now coming on board with some resources to join, particularly focusing on monitoring and evaluation of the first phase we did last year. So these are the kind of things we need to do for all our IPs. I think it's really very important. We shouldn't just be thinking about the joint resource mobilization in theoretical sense. In practical sense, it's a thing we can easily do together. And I strongly believe with the two examples we've been having, the one we did this year with Houghton Province, and I know Seliso will say something about that. It's something like that. We jointly mobilize resources, we put it there, and then we're able to hold the summit for SMME for Houghton Province, over 200 of them. And I think those are the kind of things we can replicate in all our IPs. It will help us a lot, addressing two problems at the same time, resource mobilization and partnership enhancement. And I think it's really, really great if we can see how we can effectively operationalize it. It will help us a lot. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. I see we have an online hand, so I would like to give the Water Research Commission, Sarshan Naidu, the opportunity. He's had his hand up for the last 5 minutes, and then you can proceed with your statement or question. The floor is yours, Sarshan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is Sarshan Naidu from the Institute of Natural Resources in Pietermaritzburg, KwaZulu-Natal. The discussion around joint mobilization of resources is a very important one, but perhaps I'd like us to also think about the joint mobilization of tools, skills, and learnings. I think UNDP are in a very privileged position to bring together communities of practice, and these communities made up by the people engaged in the projects that partner with UNDP SA. So I'd like us to think a little bit about how UNDP can use this opportunity to bring communities of practice together, which will in turn stimulate ideas and mechanisms for joint mobilization of resources, reduce the levels of duplication of effort, and increase the levels of shared learning and co-development.
Thank you for your excellent insights, and our apologies for misrepresenting your organization. Sarshan is in fact from the Institute for Natural Resources and not from the Water Research Commission. I think, colleagues, we are frantically taking notes of a lot of the ideas and recommendations, and over the course of the lunch break, we will distill them and workshop them towards the end of today in the last session. So I want to continue with the engagement on this particular session and give our good colleague the opportunity to share his reflections. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I just want to latch on what Dr. Ayo has mentioned on resource mobilization, to also maybe come up with a suggestion. Well, one of the things that Gabe and I said we laughed when we met this morning, but I think around January and February, at times when I call Dr. Ayo or I speak to Pumla, I was almost in tears because of the bureaucracy in the two institutions, one being government and one being UNDP, especially when it comes to the issue of collaborative resource or cost sharing. Unfortunately, as government, we are governed by what do you call it? PFMA, and which is very brutal. And I think most of the CFOs are actually regarded as a Bible that they can't even deviate from. What we probably might need to do as the two institutions is to try and work out a framework which should be adopted either by the national treasury or the provincial treasury to understand that the arrangements do happen between the UNDP and the government, especially when you have to transfer the money from government to the UNDP. I remember we were haggling on a clause on the cost-sharing agreement, the clause that said that our guys from legal wanted to add a clause to say that we will audit the UNDP books. And so we kind of like had to do international relations 101 to try and explain who is UNDP and what role do we play as government. So my suggestion is that we probably need to come up with a framework that will help in that aspect. Then the second aspect would then be on, I think it has been a song that I have been singing since I came to start working in partnership with the UNDP, that is collaborative resource mobilization. Both institutions, the government and the UNDP, carries a name with credibility, whereby when we knock on the doors of the corporates, I do believe if we do that collaboratively, we will be able to amass the resources that we need for programs. And I think that those that are within the government departments should also be looking at that and so say, how do we, collaboratively do that? And also those that are within the space of civil society. I mean, if you go to Microsoft, you get there, you are probably the 11th person who's knocking at their door. And so to try to limit that traffic and also to give credence to our programs, we need to start working together.
Would you like to continue? Because these are very, very concrete and actionable ways forward with regards to, jointly mobilizing resources, particularly joint approaching of private sector, for example. We also appreciate your, your very focused recommendation, on bottlenecks relating to, for example, operational issues and clauses in agreements that can prohibit the mobilization of resources and government cost sharing. Thank you for that, and thank you also to Sershin on his ideas regarding communities of practice and the power of knowledge resident in these communities of practice that can be utilized to identify resources and new partners. Colleagues, do we have any other deliberations and points here from yourselves, from UNDP, from our guests, and from our virtual friends and colleagues? We have a colleague here from Environment, Prashanthi Naika. Your hand is up.
Thank you. My name is Prashanthi Naika from the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment, where I'm the project manager lead for the UNDP GF Bioprospecting Value Chains project. Thank you, Chair, for setting an inspiring session and the conversation that's happened thus far. Particularly on resource mobilization, from experience, particularly in the bioprospecting and biotrade economy, I see that resource mobilization for an emerging economy like that comprised of three phases: the lobbying, the formalizing, and the implementation. The lobbying, what I've gathered from our experience, can be multi-stakeholder. And fortunately for the bioprospecting and biotrade economy, there's leadership in the public sector for this economy, particularly from the environment side to things, as well as the Department of Science and Innovation linked to indigenous knowledge. So it was really easy to identify the custodians for this particular emerging economy and then group together as broader networks to lobby for financing in the sector, as well as for better planning in terms of, better planning for greater impact now and into the future. So when I say now and into the future, the sector looked at resource mobilizing and alignment of parallel projects for now, and then we started to work through clusters through our Biopanza initiative, the Bioproducts Advancement Network South Africa, which involves the coming together of key partners and stakeholders in the sector that are doing fragmented efforts, but how we can come together through this platform and have a collective and integrated impact. So through the Biopanza and focus clusters like finance, market access, sustainable supply, we managed to plan not only for now, but also for the future in terms of resource mobilization. So that actually fell in the lobbying part. Then formalization of partnerships that manifest from the lobbying phase. This is a very important aspect, especially if we take a resource mobilization through a multi-stakeholder type of approach. Because I think that's an area where there's a need for innovation in terms of how we can formalize multi-stakeholder type partnerships in an effective and efficient manner. So that's a gap and also an opportunity or action for the future. Then in terms of implementation for resource mobilization, also another important aspect closely linked to formalization. Because when I'm thinking formalization, I'm thinking contracts, MOUs, MOAs. But how do we do this that when one person comes in for local value addition, the other in terms of market access kicks in seamlessly? So I think the space of formalization and seamless implementation are areas where we can work together using some of the techniques that we've embraced, especially during the COVID-19, and test it in formalization and implementation in terms of resource mobilization. So we are very excited and open to lead in that discussion, especially through the Biopanza network, because we've advanced in terms of lobbying for resource mobilization, and we are looking forward in building in the areas of formalization and implementation, and building on the successes and techniques that we've implemented, especially during now in COVID-19. Thank you.
Thank you, Prashanthi. This was really excellent, your summary of really the complex processes around lobbying, formalization, and implementation. You know, in UNDP, when we think of, we often use the term co-creation, co-development, and jointness. But in your unpacking of the complexity of these processes, it paves a good framework on how we could embark with the national leadership on resource mobilization at the various, along all the steps in the way. Any feedback, colleagues, on Prashanthi's remarks?
Thank you, Program Director. Mine is just going to be a combination of the previous discussions we've had on this, in this particular session, and starting from the Natural Resources Commission. I think the issue you've raised is very important. Community of practice is what UNDP does every second. And I think it's really good for us, and if we can start it here. Shortly after the presentation from CSIR this morning, I discussed with Sadiso, and we're talking about a similar small entity doing the same thing, but the two of them are not connected. And I see this as an opportunity of doing a similar thing here. Most of these things that we do, we need to find a way of connecting, because it is the synergy that will help us to really achieve this. And I just want to let you know that community of practice is what we're going to emphasize in moving this idea forward, particularly among projects that we implement and those that are implemented by other partners, so that we don't need to be reinventing the wheel. What we need to do is to bring ideas together, connecting various actors on the ground. And I think this is something that is very important for us. Particularly, you realize that in most of the things we do with all our IPs, a number of them deal with the issue of youth engagement, whether in governance, whether in inclusive growth, whether in resilience and climate adaptation issue, we need to really see how we connect so that we bring everybody together so that we can share experiences. And the issue raised by Sariso is really very important in the sense that, one, there is perhaps there's an ongoing discussion with National Treasury on how to address the bottleneck. Because the Public Financial Management Act is what they refer to, which again tends to hamper effective implementation of resources. But we succeeded late last year to bring National Treasury on the discussion of the United Nations Sustainable Development Cooperation Framework. I think the discussion is really on, and we will soon get to the green light zone that will help us to really see how we do this. But in the meantime, I think based on what Sadiso mentioned, why can't we bring the CFOs of all our IPs together and let us brainstorm? Can we do that as an action point here? Because it's good for us to hear from them how we can do it. And then we can also bring some of our colleagues that have been working on this across many regions to come and listen to the situation here. Perhaps one of the follow-up action of this particular meeting may be that. Let's see if we can, if it's not all the IPs, the strategic IPs, we can bring them together, the CFO, that this is Chief Financing Officers of these IPs, so that we can discuss and let's address some of these challenges that may inhibit us from achieving joint resource mobilization we are all aiming at. I think it's a major lesson. What Sadiso mentioned, and I pity both Sadiso and Pumla, because it was really tough when we were doing the summit. But it's a thing that must be done, but we have to do it appropriately. And if you were to do it appropriately, we will cancel that and shift the event again. But all of a sudden, I mean, good enough, we were able to address it. But we don't want to go through that tenuous process. So if we meet with the CFOs, we can harvest ideas from them. Have they been able to do this in the past? And we can then use our own, we can learn from there if there are some other bottlenecks internally within UNDP that we can address. Unfortunately, that issue he mentioned is a General Assembly resolution, which no UN agency can change. Because by General Assembly resolution, you cannot audit UNDP. That's part of it. But again, we must find a way of working around it without bending the rules. So that's one thing which I think is really very important. And thanks to Shanti, my dear sister from DEFF. Those issues you mentioned are very important. And I think it's good for us to really bring some people with practical experiences on resource mobilization to come together and let's brainstorm how we can take this one forward. This could be another initiative. Perhaps in each of our IPs, we say, okay, who is your focal person on resource mobilization? Bring them on board. Let's have one-on-one, let's have a meeting, a session, together with colleagues in UNDP, and let's discuss how best to do this. So there are two action points. The CFOs, the resource mobilization focal person in each of our IPs, so that we harvest ideas to get something, a hybrid that will be good for both the government and UNDP in moving forward. I think this would be great. And the other one is what we'll be doing by all the team leaders in terms of community. So thank you.
Thank you very much for your apt summary, RR. I think at this juncture, we are almost ready to close the session because we're on time, but I see there's one important question, or a suggestion rather, posed by Pooven Naika in the chat box. I'm aware that many of you are not online at the moment, so I do want to give Pooven from the Saibono Science Discovery Center an opportunity. Pooven, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much, Janice, and thank you for the invitation. As a new possible collaborative partner, I just want to make an insight into what I've heard today. And I feel that you guys are doing such an amazing job that my suggestion just falls on this resource mobilization. I think you just need to activate a strong joint case for support. And this should be given a face, because the programs that you're doing, I mean, we only heard about it if we Google the UNDP or if we, with my chats with Janice and Tove. So, you know, you're not out there as the UNDP with your joint partners. And I feel that this should be given a face, and all programs, whether good or bad, should be related to private sector funding. And with their criteria and a strong approach, you should be able to, with the stats that you have as well, be able to harness this funding. And I feel that the UNDP, together with its partners, can reach funding, either monetary or in kind, with a very strong approach. So that's just my 2 cents worth. Thanks, Janice.
Thank you, Pooven. I wanted to turn a question back at you with your permission, please. You're a not-for-profit organization,
Sure.
and you know, it would be interesting to hear from you any challenges that you have experienced in your engagement with, you know, with the purpose of unlocking private sector funding. You entirely rely on private sector funding, and you're a long-standing, very reputable not-for-profit. What are some of the challenges that you have experienced as an organization? And the reason why I'm asking this question is that perhaps we have similar experiences. Perhaps there's some lesson learning that we can reflect upon.
Thanks, Janice. And I'm not going to make any excuses. I've been doing fundraising for the past 28 years now, and mostly in the higher education sector for 3 different universities. And this was a new profile for Cybono. So they never had a set profile for fundraising at Cybono. And my 2 contract is almost up. However, what has actually happened in the interim is just when we started gaining momentum, COVID hit. And I must tell you, although COVID hit, the doors are opening to many funding opportunities. And people are saying, look, we currently funding our current projects and we're not taking on any more new projects. However, maybe the new year, we will have you in as a possible partner. So the doors are not shutting completely, which is fantastic. And every little opportunity, whether it's a 5,000 or whether it's a foot in the door, is what we are harvesting right now. So a lot of in-kind donations coming our way as well from the likes of the US Embassy, the Finnish Embassy. So international funding is where we're looking at as well, stronger more so than the current corporate funding. Corporates are very COVID hit right now, so they looking at funding COVID-related projects and their current projects. I'm having a meeting with Chikalulu next week, and it's mentioned that, look, if we are ready to accept the fact that we will get funding later on in conversation, then he's willing to sit down and chat with us. That's the type of conversation that's happening at the moment. So, yeah, it's difficult to get monetary funding, but, you know, you've got to push. And that's what we've been doing. Thank you.
Thank you. It's good to hear perspective from a long-standing not-for-profit. And indeed, it makes a strong case for continued seeking for the creation of partnerships. And I think the mantra of today's discussion is that nobody can do it alone. We need to lock arms and do it together. So colleagues, it's now 12 and on the hour, and we have some very clear and very well-defined recommendations that have arisen from the discussions here this morning. And no doubt, as we continue in the agenda, more recommendations will materialize. So at this juncture, I want to thank all of you for your inputs, and I want to give the opportunity back to our program director, Simone, to lead us into the next agenda session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Janice, and thank you to all the participants and partners who made inputs. I'm quite excited to take those recommendations forward and flesh them out further. So we're now moving into the part of our program where we start to shift from looking back to looking ahead. And the next session will be looking at our 2021 targets, evaluation plan, and other areas of project management. This will be presented by Fred Shukweni and Aubrey Manamela. Fred is an M&E specialist, and Aubrey is our program finance associate. So please come on up.
Morning, colleagues, once more. Yeah, for me, it's just to take you through the evaluation plan. Remember, when the CPD has been, endorsed by the program appraisal committee and our executive board, now it means it's a must, it's a mandatory plan that we have to implement together with you. So I just picked some of the points that I felt appropriate for this. But just before I start that, I think I just need to, say that as we come with actionable recommendations, because we can see in this board, we are touching so many things, in different areas. But after this, it means we must have a marching order to say, in terms of M&E, this is what it has to be done before the next board, so that, the experts who are sitting around the M&E can work together in this program, so that when we come into the next board, we know exactly what we have, identified in the previous board, and then we see if there is a progress. Otherwise, we'll be resuscitating same information now and then. The same with now that we have got the 2 points for resource mobilization. I think the team that are experts on that, they need to start, working on that, so that at the end of the day, we have got some progress. And thanks to Dr. Kifilwe and Dr. Udusolo for, highlighting some of the M&E things. I think Dr. Masite, you mentioned that, we need to strengthen M&E system. Really, if we want to show progress and showing impact, M&E is the key that we need to strengthen. So what I'm going to touch on is the decentralized evaluations. Why decentralized evaluation? Country offices in the UNDP has to conduct their own evaluations. We do have an evaluations that it's conducted by our regional office, the independent evaluation office in New York. And normally that it's what we call independent country program evaluation. This is done by them, most especially when we have to move to the new cycle. So like now, to implement our decentralized evaluation, this is the time. You have mentioned so many programs that really require evaluations in this country office. And then we will look at the plans. I think we did highlight, we have got 12 evaluations that are planned currently. I won't go into detail because last week we did that. And the other thing that we need to look at, which is very critical, is the evaluation process. Sometimes there are lots of delays. Whether it's, delays due to, getting the right evaluators, whether it's the delay, because of, like now we are in the COVID-19 era, there are so many things that we need to look and who plays a role in each and every, through the whole process of evaluation. I just picked the project and outcome evaluation. I know my boss will say, why didn't you put impact evaluation? For this, I just said, no, maybe let me stick on these two for now. But that impact evaluation is very critical. Are we making that change that we said we want to see? So really, for us now, I think these two now, I will emphasize them because there are other evaluations as well, across the board, like, thematic evaluation, but I didn't put them on these slides. They are cross-cutting. And the other thing is to look at the TOR, the terms of reference. And then, as I mentioned, you can see we have planned to have a UN SDCF evaluation, which was previously known as UNDAF. And then country program evaluations that we are going to undertake. And then we also have outcomes, as I indicated, thematic, whether it's HIV, like now we have got new, emerging areas like COVID-19. We want maybe to concentrate on that, in this theme, whether it's youth, as we mentioned a lot about youth, person with disabilities. Those are thematic evaluations that UNDP normally conduct as decentralized evaluations. And there are lots of program evaluation, as you have seen in the earlier presentation, that we have embarking on a number of projects. So these are the projects evaluations that we plan for the whole year. I won't go into details because we have, and these are just costed evaluation. Each evaluation is costed, and it has got partners that, are supposed to play a role. So I won't go into detail. There are 12 of them, but it doesn't mean that we are limited here. As emerging areas are coming on and there is a need for evaluation, they will be included in this plan. And then the evaluation process, as I indicated, it doesn't start with a preparation of evaluation. We start from step number 1. As I mentioned, it has to be approved by our leaders, and the evaluation has been approved by our leaders, and then as well as when we do the project documents, there are evaluations that we highlight that this project is valid for evaluation. And remember, for JF, we do have a policy that is, specific, that is so specific about evaluation. Whether we have to conduct mid-term evaluation, we have to conduct end-of-term evaluations. So we do have those policies that, and in fact, even the magnitude of the evaluations, there are policies, we know about them, we'll share with you, as we go on. So in terms of step number 2, where we do preparations, there are governance structures that needs to, oversee this evaluation taking place. So we need that to be in place. And then there are also terms of reference, as I mentioned, that we have to develop, to scope the evaluation that we want to do. And also the issue of documentations, because we need to refer to other documents. We don't do evaluation in isolation. We need to look so that we can, what is that term? Cross whatever, analyze the situations. And then managing the conduct of the evaluation, that is very important, because from the recruitment process until the evaluators are on board, we need to manage that. Sometimes there are lots of delays on those steps that are needed there. And you are talking about, process and regulations not talking to each other. So those things can delay, the finalization of the evaluation, and find that when we finally do that evaluations, we have missed some opportunities that we should have presented those results to certain events that took place in the country or globally. And then the use of evaluations, yes, this is very critical. And I have seen a lot of presentation today indicating that, the issue of replication, and the issue of, replicating the project, scaling up, the issue of, what do you call this, the best practices and all those things. So it's very important to do that. And then I said I picked up these ones, just to show examples how we do it in the UNDP. We provide outcome evaluations to support accountability and programs and evidence of the UNDP contribution to outcomes. Remember, the outcomes already we get them from the UNSDCF, which are aligned to government priorities, the National Development Plan. So we take those outcomes as they are, and then we can do evaluation the outcome of our evaluation, because we need to prepare as UNDP. As remember, we also need to do evaluation at a higher level at the UN SDCF. We do evaluation to guide performance improvement in regards to the appropriateness of the UNDP partnership strategy. Because as we are talking about partnership. Is it our partnership strategy appropriate, and then impediments of the outcomes? Because sometimes what are those things that are impeding for us to achieve the outcomes? As Dr. Masiteng has mentioned, there is not much progress in terms of implementing the National Development Plan, and she was saying that we are in the last decade now. How far have we done that? So it's very important to do that. Lessons learned, which I have seen people indicating that there are lessons learned. We do those evaluations to do the lessons learned. And then we also need to assess relevance. As we are here, what are the targets? Are we relevant to the target group's needs? Are we relevant to South Africa as UNDP needs? Those things need to be looked, And then effectiveness and efficiency, the objectives of the programs, the CPD, are we achieving them? And then the efficiency, the resources that we are talking about now that we need to mobilize, are we getting the results, optimal results that we are planning to achieve? The issue of sustainability is very critical, because as you can see, UNDP is doing catalytic work. At the end of the day, as Dr. Ayo was saying, that is the responsibility of implementing partner to make sure that they replicate these things, they scale out these things. So have that capacity that UNDP has built, will it be able to make sure that implementing partner move on their own? And then it also inform high-level evaluations. Like I mentioned, the independent country program evaluations that will be done, to inform us when we get into the new cycle. And then at the regional level, there are also work that we do at the regional level. The water project that a colleague has presented, this can inform that at the regional level. And it supports learning. And then the project evaluations, it's all about, looking at the inputs that we are putting there, the efficiency. We need to assess the results of that. And then the effectiveness, the goals, are we reaching those goals? And in terms of the outputs, we are looking at the relevance and sustainability of those outputs. So it's very important that, we have understanding of these assessments. And then as I mentioned, it also helps us to improve, to continue, to upscale initiatives that we are coming with, to replicate, and then setting other alternatives. And then also, it informs us about the learning that I talked about. So the TOR, this is how the structure of the TOR, but I won't talk to each one of them because of time. I'll be just, touching some of the things. This is how our TOR, when we, advertise the evaluations, it looks like and what it covers. And then, as I mentioned, these are our international good practice standards that UNDP has adopted. And we are not limited here. We can localize it and looking at other aspects. And as a UN, we are not also limited in these standards. We can look at the issue of human rights, gender, innovation as we are coming on. These are the standards that we adopted, and then we are mostly concentrating on this. But as we develop this, whatever we talk with the IPs and we look at this, is there any these other standards that we think we can focus on? But these are the global standards that we have adopted. And we have got some questions that will help us, because we might not be able to, do evaluation across all those standards that I mentioned. Maybe you, on a project level, donor might be interested in the efficiency of the project, which he wants to see the monies that he has put in there. So these are the questions that we are looking at. To what extent does the criteria or that standard inform the purpose of the evaluation? If they are not informing the evaluation, why should we do all of them? Or why should we add? And then how much and what kind of information do potential users need? As I mentioned, the donors, government will be needing certain information. So those standards will help us to say, this is good, we can evaluate this standard on this project. I don't know how to remove this, madam. And then the other thing is which one, is, like I mentioned, can we use all of them, or some are carrying more weight on this project evaluation or on this outcome evaluation? Is the criteria a useful or appropriate measure for the particular evaluation? If it's not, really, we don't, because those standards that we put here, they need more questions, and it means they need more resources. So we might need to cut and focus on certain standards that we want. Which criterion will produce the most useful information given available resources? As I mentioned, those are costed evaluations that are indicated, but the resources might be, limited. So we need to, those standards, they need to help us to say which one can we evaluate. And then evaluation products, these are the evaluation products. Inception's reports, very critical, because it's where with the evaluator we can get each other to understand the scope of the evaluation, the TOR. And then if we don't do that, we don't have the inception meeting, we might miss up, and then we don't get what we're supposed to evaluate. And then the draft evaluation report, this needs a project appraisal committee or evaluation committee that can review the evaluation report. And then it's very important, because we cannot just say, we trust the evaluators, and at the end of the day, we don't get the expected outcome of the results. Final evaluation report, which has to be shared with everyone. And then we can also ask the evaluators to generate some knowledge information on that, in terms of evaluation policies and other knowledge products. And then this one, it's about the team. Really, we struggle sometimes. When we did an evaluation on disability, on that area, we couldn't get experts who are specializing on that area, and it delays the whole process. So we need to look at the experts, and we define exactly what we want, the expertise that we want, the technical knowledge that we want from that. And the other thing is the issue of the RBM, because each and every project has got an evaluation, monitoring and evaluation framework. Will they be able to interpret those indicators and the targets, you see? So it's something that, the composition and competencies that we focus on looking at when we do evaluations. So this is the management arrangements. I don't know, these things appear on me only. I see here, it's not there. Yeah, you see, we need to know the role and responsibility of each and every one in terms of organizational and management structures. We need that. We need to be guided. We need to know how we are going to report to our bosses. Implementation arrangements, very important, because there might be expectations that are there. They need to be clarified in terms of who should be doing what, in implementing the evaluation work. And then the other thing is the work, the advisory panel members who do the quality work of the evaluations. We need to define their role and responsibility. And these things, we work with the implementing partners, just to make sure that things are done correctly. These are time frames in every evaluation that we do. It's very important that we have got time frames that we put in place. When will be the desk review take place? The briefings, when will they take place? How long, and all those things. So we have got a table that defines these things. So we will be sharing with you all these things when we do the evaluation. As I indicated, we need money for the evaluations, of which in the UNDP evaluations are well covered. They've got their own budgets and all those things. So we really, really need to make sure that there is money there. And as people indicated, it's not only money. What are the other resources that we can get for facilitating the evaluation process? And then also remember we are working on limited time and resources. So we need to make sure that the evaluators understand all these dynamics. And then during the COVID-19, UNDP produced, an evaluation policy that governs us conducting an evaluation during the COVID-19, because the evaluability of the project might not take place. Like now, if they see there are lots of cases in one areas, it means we won't be able to do that. And this guidance, they are helping us to see what are other things that we can do. Like now, we can see the room is not full. We are doing virtual meeting. So those are some of the things that try virtual meetings, if it's not possible to can continue with the evaluation in the country office. You can collect data remotely. There are lots of learnings that we can have, yeah. And then we can combine evaluation, as I mentioned, in terms of outcomes. Instead of doing one evaluation, we can combine them. And also the use of national evaluators, very, very important. So I think I'm done, madam. I won't go to the annexures. You can go on. We'll share the presentation. And as I mentioned, I think we need to have concrete, recommendation moving forward so that next time when we come in terms of monitoring, what are the things that we discuss so that when we have got the third meeting, we can look back and see if we are progressing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fred. And as you mentioned, these presentations will be shared. Aubrey, over to you.
The purpose of my presentation, I'm just going to provide an overview of the HACT assurance plan for 2021. As you may know, that the HACT is an acronym that stands for Harmonized Approach to Cash Transfer, that was endorsed in February 2014 by United Nations Development Group. We can ask the question, why do we have to perform, when do we do the HACT assurance plan? It is a necessity for UNDP, particularly for those who are in the HACT committee, to plan in line with the policies and procedures. And such plan has to be approved by the DRR or the RR in terms of what needs to be partaken for that particular financial year. And then it is reviewed by the HQ on an annual basis. Why do we have to perform? There are some activities that needs to be performed with HACT process assurance activities. The HACT assurance activities is to determine the purpose, whether the funds transferred to the IP were used for the intended purpose. If you have planned for project implementation activities, you have to stick to that. That is why it's quite important and imperative for a HACT process assurance activity. Why assurance planning? It's critical for the successful implementation of HACT framework. It is also important for agency management to assure other stakeholders regarding the overall management of funds at the country office level. We have the HACT framework processes, whereby for each and every year we'll conduct the periodic spot checks. And such spot checks, it is performed by the independent auditor. For an example, my colleague will also provide the glimpse on how do we perform such as spot checks. And also we have to, I normally say this when we do the programmatic monitoring activities. We are not detectives, but we are just to ensure that what was planned initially, it is according to the annual work plan that was presented to UNDP and other stakeholders. And also we have to perform the audits on an annual basis. As you may know that in terms of the Office of Audit Investigation, South Africa falls under the low risk. That means if a project achieves 600,000 threshold, it qualifies to be audited. But it doesn't necessarily mean even if you cannot achieve 600,000, cannot be selected for audit. You can be selected even though you have achieved less than 600,000 threshold. One of the issues that we did discuss is the issue of the micro-assessment, where we had some discussion with other IP, whereby they were quite concerned that why the country office is doing the micro-assessment within 24 months. Then I just want to emphasize that we are doing the micro-assessment, that we are in the new cycle that started in 2021 and in 2025. Then in terms of the policies and procedures, yes, for each and every IP that is going to be disbursed with more than 150,000 for that particular cycle, we have to perform an assessment, one way or the other. Because if you don't perform such an assessment, it really reflects bad on us in terms of the IFD, that stands for Integrated Financial Dashboard. We have to perform such micro-assessment that will be covering for the period of 5 years in terms of the CPD. Well, this is the health assurance plan that we have planned for 2021. One, all the IPs that we are dealing with this year, whereby we will be dispersing more than 150,000. It was 300,000. So in terms of the revised policies for each and every IP that we are going to disperse more than 150,000 this year, we have to conduct micro-assessment. But the question can arise, what if one particular IP, the project comes to an end on the 30th of June 2021? The bottom line, let's go back. How much is going to be disbursed to that particular IP? Like for example, when you look at the Sun Parks and Sunbee, their projects are coming to end, those two projects are coming to end this year. But when you look at the overall budget, it is way above 150,000. So it is a prerequisite that in terms of the POP, we have to conduct such micro-assessment. And I'm so happy that they've allowed for the more students to conduct, of which is a process that is going on as we speak. Probably we might have the overall micro-assessment reports for everyone before the end of this month. And then also we have to do the spot checks. The spot checks will be covering the expenditure between January and June this year. And the most important thing, if an IP expend more than $50,000, yes, we have to conduct such spot checks. That will be done by the independent auditor, of which right now is Mo Stevens, who we're conducting that. And also we have to do the programmatic monitoring site visit that is led by Fred, and then the coordinator will be whoever will be handling that. As we speak now, the most project that is are alluded that the portfolio of the country office is mainly Jeff and others. Janice and other program managers are responsible for that, to ensure that we keep abreast in terms of the program monitoring site visit. We have to make sure that it is advisable for all the implementing partners that on quarterly basis, so that we have to ensure that we do the quarterly progress reports that needs to be shared to assess the implementation of the project activities, whether we are in par. So what I'll do is that after this, I'll reshare this the health assurance plan that has been approved. And as you may know, we have to intensify the project monitoring site visit to ensure that we adhere to the policies and procedures of UNDP. That was my last slide. Thank you very much.